course, was Ravel Zagan. Take 4, I think. Yeah, sort of a bit preoccupied with this piece at the moment. It sort of rings true. There's something edgy, acrid, foreboding. It's got all those qualities. It's gypsy music at its best, and it's the music of Maurice Ravel. That performance was Zeno Franiscatti, apparently from 1928, which would make it one of the very first recordings of the work. And Ravel was very much alive and well when that was made. In fact, he was touring America. But, oh gosh, I love Franiscatti's playing. Very much an exponent of the Franco-Belgian school with that very... it's a perfumed player. He's got lots of colour in his sound. Very French. So, anyhow, that's our start off for today. We'll probably find a few more of these to play because I'm in the zone. Some good gypsy music. In fact, we can continue with another gypsy piece. This one is in the tradition of playing music from the 20s, dance band music from the 20s. Well, this is sort of an extended performance of a piece called Gypsy. It's Paul Whiteman and the band from 1928, about the same year as the recording we've just heard. It's on one of the Whiteman Face labels. It's an extended 12-inch performance, about 4 minutes long, but interestingly, it features a cornet solo by the great Bix Beiderbecke behind a mellophone. You'll hear it towards the end. It's a muted cornet solo and it's just fantastic playing, full of space, and it really picks up on the flavour of the piece superbly. This is one of the very great recordings that Whiteman did in the symphonic tradition. Let's listen to Gypsy. This is vk3sl.
Sky meant to guide you over your weary way. Your merry tribe close beside you, happiness night and day. This great big world all before you, everywhere you may roam. No matter where you may roam to, any place is your home. Gypsy, you have no destination, gypsy. Your haven, all creation, your way is my way to follow. Gypsy, you cast a spell of magic, gypsy. My love is deep and tragic, lead me, and I'll gladly follow. Throughout the land of Romany, your caravan, until you beckon me to come and join your great clan, gypsy. We'll wander hand in hand, and gypsy, we'll live in sweet abandon there where there is no tomorrow.
Mike. Paul Whiteman and the band. And that was Gypsy.
What an amazing recording.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. 1928, and one of the very great big solos, I think, on that performance.
It was lovely.
Yeah, really spacious and beautifully balanced, and just harmonically interesting, of course, as well as they always are with Mr. B. And what a performance. Rhapsody recordings. They made quite a few. Whiteman made a number of these 12-inch Potato Head label recordings of sort of Gershwin pieces. I think they did Gershwin's Concerto in F, the Rhapsody in Blue, Tchaikovsky Iriana is a piece which is sort of a palm court version of Tchaikovsky's greatest melodies, and this one and a few others as well. But,
That was extravaganza, all right, wasn't
yeah,
it?
it certainly was. Yeah.
The cembalo at the start, I love that.
Yeah, great, isn't it? Nothing like the sound of the cimbalum. I love it. It's it just sort of draws you into that other world. Yeah, but particularly like that version of Franiscati. It's interesting listening to all these varied performances of Zagan, how different they are, and how the different violinists took a very personal take. And it invites a very improvisatory, rhapsodic approach.
Certainly a lot different to the one we had the other night.
Yeah, very different to Heifetz, which is just like being electrocuted.
He's often like that.
Yes, that's right. Heifetz is so intense. But Franiscati had a lot of sort of delicacy and sort of light colours, light hues in his tone, and that sort of airy, slightly effervescent Franco-Belgian sound. But one of the very first recordings, I think we'll have to look out for some others too. I'm on a mission. I like these performances of Zagan, and there's so many out there. So anyhow, how are things with you, Frank?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes. Very quiet day today. Lots of sun. I got soaked up. They reckon you should have at least 10 minutes of sun a day to get your vitamin D. Well, I'm about 10 days ahead now.
Oh, good for you. Excellent move. It's the thing to do when there's sunshine. Get out and absorb it. Yeah, I think
Did a bit of walking. I'm doing walking up and down the driveway. So that's how life is at the moment. It's walking up and down your driveway.
Yes, microcosms.
Kathy'd gone shopping and I needed exercise. So
Yeah.
the driveway beckoned.
Okay.
And it worked well, and I've been doing other exercises, so I feel very virtuous anyway.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Yeah, no, just getting out in the sun's a good thing. And being outside, fresh air, spring's upon us. Well, look, I'm sort of.
How was your day?
Oh, look, okay, well, intense. Work is full on. It's unrelenting, really. The hour upon hour of teaching, youngsters, trying to connect with the experience. I mean, they don't say much. That's the problem. The kids, they just, even after months of working this way, I have to fill the gaps. You don't want young kids. You don't want awkward silences. So you have to. Do the proverbial polyfiller and lots of encouragement and building on small things, positive things. Just have to. And you move in fits and starts, small increments really.
Yes.
But they're doing okay, and I'm hoping that we will see them in person next term. This is the last week of term, and then there'll be 2 weeks of holidays, which
Holidays, of course.
yeah, it's coming up soon. But we won't be doing any holidays. We'll be just
Holidays, isn't it?
we'll just be here. William's asked me to play lots of football kicks with him during the holidays, so
Yeah.
I think I'll be out there in the sun in the court, kicking the footy with him for a bit. So and we might get that table tennis table sorted again, and do some tournaments, family tournaments, which was a bit of fun last year actually. So
My grandkids kept. They're building. They just finished building the Lego. What have they got? The space shuttle.
oh, very good. Oh, that'll be great.
Join the moon rocket
Yes.
and other pieces. And inside the space shuttle, there is, of course, the Hubble telescope.
Oh, very good. Excellent. It's a Lego kit, is it?
Yes.
Oh,
Nice.
nice.
It had thousands of pieces, and
Yeah.
it's
yeah.
occupying them. I don't know whether Patrick's going to keep buying them Lego.
They're kits you can make once.
Afternoon all.
Oh, g'day. How are
Hey,
you?
Frank.
Were you a Lego person when you were young?
Yeah, little Lego and also Meccano.
Oh, very good.
Oh, yeah, I'm too old for Lego, but I love Meccano.
Excellent. Okay. Oh, Meccano's great. Yeah, all those little fiddly little screws and things. But
yeah, you just, you did little nuts and bolts and things everywhere. But, regularly hear Mum in the vacuum cleaner and clunk, clunk, clunk. Well,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes. The only thing missing from Meccano was little compression washers because they'd invariably come loose and then something would fall apart or you'd have
Yeah.
but
I think
fantastic.
Dad sorted me out with some of those. He kind of said, here, you
Did he?
need some of these.
Oh, really? Oh, very good. Yeah.
Little clips too that you used to you fitted them over the end of axles to hold wheels on, and they used to get lost on the floor, and then you'd stand on one of them with bare feet and
Yes.
you'd really know it.
You'd get the full cog
I
experience.
saw a great meme to that effect on social media a few months back, and it was a new arrivee in hell, and Satan's standing there with his trident, and the guy's looking around, and he's standing there in bare feet, and he's going, so where's all the fire? He said, oh no, we gave that up years ago. We find the walking barefoot over Lego much, much better.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Perfect. Oh, yes. What a meme. It's an experience we've all had. Yeah. And then you get that imprint in your foot. Yes. No, look, I love the Meccano. I had the Meccano donkey engine that belonged to my cousin. It was about a third. In fact, I think it belonged to my uncle before that. So it was sort of passed on to me, and I used to love firing it up and making things that would sort of have motion and movement and different dimensions. It's good fun. Yeah, the donkey engine, little steam engine.
Yeah, I always lusted after one of those. I never actually had one, but
Right. Yeah.
I knew they existed.
Sure.
Yeah, I never had that. I worked out a way. I used a few little electrical motors and batteries and things, but I never had the steam engine.
Okay, yeah, no, it's all good fun though. Meccano, it's been around forever, and it's still going strong from all accounts.
Very pleased to say it is, yes.
Yeah. that's-
Okay, so it's still being made and used, because
Yeah.
obviously Lego's going hand over fist. But
Yeah,
I've really
that's right.
not encountered Meccano in a long time.
Yeah, no, look, there are, and a relative of ours made a big Meccano steam engine recently. It wasn't a working one like a donkey engine; it was just a sort of static thing, but very, very impressive. It looked marvellous, and it was a traditional Meccano fare.
Wonderful.
So yeah, and that was a new kit, a very, very expensive kit, I think, but it was very impressive.
The thing with Lego is that you can build impressive things far more quickly.
I think that sort of suits the modern young person a bit more, maybe.
Spot on.
A bit more expedience, instant gratification. But it's good to remember these things.
Interesting though, the shuttle. That'd be a cool one to build. I've actually got the plastic kits where you make like you used to buy ships and aeroplanes and all that. They're scale models from all of the various pieces of plastic you had to glue together and paint. And
Yes.
I've managed to acquire over a little while. I've got the shuttle Saturn V rocket. I had one years ago, but it got destroyed by Mum's cat.
Oh no!
But I've managed to re-get it, like a 40th anniversary reissue. So
Yeah.
I've got a Millennium Falcon, a TIE Fighter, and an X-wing. So I've kind of got all of the the main ones.
Good on
Once
you.
I get a few things sorted out here, I'll build them and
You're going to
set up
suspend
around
them from the
place.
ceiling with a bit of...
Yeah, I'll do something with them, or maybe even might do the whole play around with a bit of LED and fibre optic lighting in them and set them up to make them look a bit
Totally.
special.
Oh, look, they look really
Sounds
good.
wonderful.
I reckon that'd be so much fun. Yeah.
My grandkids are on a space kick with Lego, so they've got the space shuttle and they've got the rocket that went to the moon, the Saturn V that went to the moon,
Yeah.
which has got 1,969 pieces in it.
That'll be a
No
test.
coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
well, that's the big one that I've got, the Saturn V. It stands 3.5, almost 4 feet tall when it's built. As in a plastic type glue together model with and the stages all come apart and.
Yeah, that's right.
But the cats, they fall foul of domestic animals, unfortunatately.
Mum's Siamese knocked it over more times I care to remember, and I was able to patch it up for a while, but it got to a point where it was unpatchable after a while.
Yes, they only take so much rough treatment. But no, it's all good. Look, I went to one of those model fairs once. Someone gave me a ticket, and And I have to say, it was unbelievable. People create war scenes and the sort of scenes out of theatres of war and military battles and sea battles, and at the level of detail is just staggering. You know how people must sit there with a huge magnifying glasses and the tiniest tweezers and construct these things.
And even some of the detailing on the models in terms of the painting, then they do the deliberate aging or, you know, like
that patina effect.
Fatiguing and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
There's some real artistry in that.
Yeah, there is.
It is quite amazing.
Yeah, and you've got to get the mud with the right type of consistency and the reflection on the mud. And, you know, in a tank scene, I've seen the splats in the right way, and they work it all out. They determine the physics of it all. But, of course, Super Marionation got all that organised a long time ago. The thing is with the Thunderbirds is why, you never see anything melting because it's all sort of done in miniature. The flames always look a bit too big, but you don't see the plastic stuff melting. It seems to like they work that one out. They must have built everything out of metal. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
You don't sort of seeing things going for a melt.
You'd be probably surprised how much timber work would be in it as well. The old set makers and stuff, like they're building up models. The stuff that I've seen in the workshops at work, the guys did with literally using lightweight ply and form work and wrapping timber on frames and stuff, and then with a bit of paint effect and stuff added on it. They are absolute wizards at what they do. They really are.
Sure. No, that's great. It'd be good, interesting to see it up close, because often with theatrical props and things up close, they're quite sort of, they use sort of broad brush techniques, but at distance it looks really sort of incredibly refined. But I've noticed that in theatre settings and things like that. But it's just getting the aspect correct. And
well, it was the interesting thing too when we went HD, and I remember reading a trade mag article about that from NHK in Japan because they were one of the early adopters and they were early in the development of the HD system. And one of the things they said that had to step up were makeup and also the set finishing and artists, because all of a sudden shooting in HD, all this stuff that you're able to get away with in SD in the analogue domain, now it's stuck out in HD. The cameras had so much reso.
Yes.
And I imagine with the advent of 4K and shooting, that's been ramped up even again, that the quality of the work and the finishing just has to be so much better.
Sure. And those lenses which have that amazing depth of field, so you see detail in the background and foreground. That's another revolution. I remember the Titanic film when that came out. That was a striking aspect of that. Is when the ship was sinking, you could see all the longitudinally, or with the depth, everything had extraordinary clarity.
Yeah, which is kind of unnatural because it's not real. Even our eyes don't see like that.
No, that's a good point.
But
sort of hyper.
I think that's actually predominantly it's a post effect called focus stacking.
Yeah, right.
Because you can't. There are ways of collecting the data in camera, but you can't. A lens as such can't reproduce it like that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's sort of a hyper reality, and you're right. It does have an unnatural look about it too. So I suppose things go in sort of. There's a not psychoacoustic, but an effect that they probably wanted to make something hyper real, certain scenes and so on. But now I want to ask you about your guitar, but I'm going to put on a track first because I know some people just sit there waiting for the music. So I've got my record here. So I was going with a bit of a gypsy theme tonight. So hang around, Frank, and I'd like to hear about your guitar. And but in the interim, I'm going to play a recording of our local little gypsy artist. This is Gizzy Rocco. She made one album for Spotlight. She was an immigrant in the 1950s, had this big career in Europe as a gypsy fiddle player, ended up as a migrant after the Second World War, had one of these really terrible experiences during the war, but landed in Australia, did a few gigs, and then just sort of completely morphed into suburbia, and the rest of it's history. We don't know what happened to her. In fact, it's a subject I've been meaning to follow up because her daughter's still alive and she's in her 80s, but this is Gizzy herself. She made this one record for Spotlight in 1950 mumble, something like that. But I've got to play this track, so it's queued up, ready to go, and then we'll hear about your guitars. Let's have some gypsy music recorded in Melbourne. From an album entitled Evening in Budapest, Gizzy Rocco, Royko, and her Continental Orchestra.
Certainly gives you that Eastern European feel, doesn't it?
It certainly does. She captures the spirit, and she had this career. It's amazing. There's a couple of newspaper articles on Trove with Mr. Fleming helped us discover a while back. This is just before COVID kicked in, because we actually traced her daughter, who lives in Croydon. But she's quite elderly, and I thought I'd wait until the fog lifts, if it does, and if she's still around, and find out what exactly happened to her, because she had this unbelievable career. She just toured for decades all over Europe. Then she ended up in Oz and did a few things on radio in the 40s, just after the war, sort of had prominence, made this record, but then totally faded into obscurity. There's no reference to her anywhere, so we assume that either she passed away young, or just sort of, absorbed into domestic nothingness. So I don't know. I'd love to know what happened to her. This is the one thing she made with Cyril Stevens under the direction of William Flynn in the early 50s on a very nice 10-inch record. In fact, there's a really good bass on this record. It's striking. And a true frequency range recording. They've got their own TFR label with three notes, or two notes from the lowest, about an octave below the stave, to about 2 octaves above the stave, all represented in a little decal. So yeah, there we have it. So now let's change gear. Let's hear about your guitar. What's the story? How's it going? Have you been practicing? Have you been discovering new things?
Yeah, a little. It's interesting because the neck's a bit different to the other electrics I've got.
Yeah.
The Telecaster style neck, and and because it's a roasted maple, so it has a different feel, and you have that smell every time you play. You get this kind of sweet mapley.
Oh, that's nice.
And I remember when I was reading the various reviews and looking at the YouTube reviews on the thing that people commented on it. I thought, oh, okay, but actually when you hold it, you go, oh, wow, you do. You really kind of get that. And so...
Okay, so is it lacquered quite lightly then? Is it to allow the wood to breathe and to...
Yeah, I think the roasting just basically, it's like I guess it's a bit like kiln drying timber.
Yeah, right.
It tends to remove a lot of the moisture. Gets it to a point where and the reason apparently is the combination of that with maple makes it incredibly stable. And so they're meant to be arguably... And they're the lighter colour, almost sort of dark creamy coloured necks that you'll see on electric guitars typically are the roasted maple ones.
Okay.
And they're meant to be the best for travelling. They stand up to, variations in temperature and
really
moisture and all that
robust,
a lot better than others.
Sure.
Well, not that I've travelled them a lot, but I've never had problems with any of the others, but certainly it's an interesting idea. But yeah, I'm finding that because of the action, I'm starting to try, playing now just that whole spider of, trying to get the dexterity up on a bit of speed, and I'm finding I'm doing more of that work on this guitar because it just feels a bit nicer in that regard. You
said it had a fairly low action and it had extra frets, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's a 24 fret. Most electric guitars and the electric acoustic style are sort of the order of 21 or 22 frets typically. Okay. Which is just shy of 2 octaves on a string. 24 takes you to 2 octaves. And it's debatable as to whether you get down there and use them often. I mean, obviously, really good players that will, but it's just nice to have the option on a different instrument, and
definitely
it affects pickup placement, but on this thing, they've got. It's interesting. The pickups are so hard against the neck. They've obviously worked hard to keep that spacing, and also just recently plugging in over the weekend into the amp and listening to these active pickups in that mode. It's interesting that I hear more through the amp with a bit of air around it than in headphones. The differences in the sound. So I'm enjoying playing it.
That's excellent.
So I've picked up one or two of the others in between, but it's probably been the one. And because it's new too, but it's certainly been the one I've been picking up a lot more. And even of an evening, if I'm sitting down watching a bit of YouTube or something downstairs, I'll sit there quietly on the couch with it on my lap and just sit there,
just noodling away,
just doing, some finger exercises, trying to build up a bit more speed and dexterity. So it's been enjoyable.
Good for you. Oh, that's excellent. Now I've got a technical question with the guitar. If you're plucking the guitar, and you're playing in the higher registers, do you have to adapt your right hand closer to the nut or closer to the tailpiece or whatever the equivalent is? So
the point that you pluck.
Yes.
There's certainly many guitarists speak about that, and it does change the sound. So the point of the string pluck does affect.
Because your string's effectively a third of its length when you're right up there.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and in fact, even closer. But yes, so where you pluck introduces a different set of harmonics, and obviously the fundamental mode of excitation of the string is a bit different depending on where you hit it. So and you do notice that sound, and you'll see if you have a look at some of the really sort of virtuosic electric players, you'll also notice there are times when they'll do harmonic sweet spot picking. So what they'll do is they'll fret a particular note on a string, and this all happens very quickly. And you'll see that the right hand, if that's their strumming hand, will come in to a position and either hammer the string or pluck it at a point even above the neck, closer to the point that they're fretting.
Yes.
At sometimes it might be a 3 or a 5 or whatever fret.
Oh, okay, right up close.
Yeah, to introduce a harmonic, a specific harmonic.
Yes, yes.
And they're called pinch harmonics.
Or artificial harmonics, aren't they? Essentially.
Yeah. Well, what you see is they fret with the left hand. They then even sometimes put down, say, the index finger of their strumming right hand at a point, somewhere between that, and still then pluck the string at a relationship behind that as well, and release the index finger that's done that little suppression, like it's picking a harmonic off.
Yes.
And it's really intricate technique, and but you see these guys doing it at blitzkrieg speed, and you hear the kind of tone it's generated, and yes, there is variation there, and it's not something I concentrate on because I'm sort of trying to worry about developing other things, but I'm certainly aware of it. And you can, like if you strum very close to the bridge or the tailpiece, you notice how much twangier the sound is as
more
opposed
of a metallic
to
sound.
When you move down towards the neck or the fretting hand, it's a mellower sort of sound typically.
Yeah, for sure. Now, look, that's all very interesting. I can relate to this because the instrument that I play, if I'm going to be playing up a very high register, I've got to move the bow almost on the bridge. Otherwise, I don't get a full resonant sound. The sound becomes sort of
obviously the point
woofy.
of excitation relative to the string length has changed dramatically.
It's quite profound when you're drawing a bow across. Otherwise, you just get a really dull sound. So that point of contact, that angle of incidence and point of contact is a really very active part of when you're rehearsing. You have to very consciously adapt.
That's interesting too, because I imagine that, so given a double bass or a cello or a violin, I would imagine that all of those instruments, regardless of who makes them, they would all be the same scale length, wouldn't they?
Yes, pretty much.
So whereas with guitars is variation.
Yeah.
So this one, as an example, is it's a typical Fender Telecaster 25.5 inch.
Yep.
And Stratocaster's the same, and I think most of my electrics. Les Pauls, the older Les Pauls, are typically shorter. They're 24.75.
Yeah.
So that means there's a change in string tension and gauge typically to compensate for the change in length to get you to the same pitch.
That's right.
And so there's more variation, and you get baritone guitars as well, longer scale length.
Yeah.
And of course now you're getting into 7 and 8 string guitars as well, and even what are called sort of radial frets, where the frets are actually slanted on some of these 7 and 8, multi-scale it's called, multi-scale fretting. So they treat it because if you start going into this 7 and 8 string domain, the bass strings, the frets actually need to be just that little bit further apart. So they fan so that when you look at the thing front on, it looks like the frets fan out a little bit.
Right, interesting.
Just to keep the scalar relationships correct.
Okay. So it's a form of compensation.
Yeah, but it's pretty wild when you see a guitar that's set up like that. You look at it and go, hang on, that looks wrong. But it's very deliberate. So it's amazing how much variation there is across even just some of the core aspects in guitar design, sort of relative to the classical suite of instruments, which are, from what I know, I don't know what the scale is on a cello, but I imagine it would always be the same.
It's pretty much the same. It does vary a little bit, and but again, you have compensate by the length of the string from the bridge to the tailpiece is absolutely critical. I think it's got to be 1/6 exactly, and so there's all these harmonic relationships. Otherwise, the instrument goes dull, or you get dull spots, and you get areas that don't resonate properly. And the other thing is tuned in fifths. There's a lot of intervallic or harmonic relationship between, so when you're playing, you can feel the lower strings getting excited or sympathetically vibrating all the time. So you're aware, and sometimes you actually excite the lower strings passively to sort of.
Wow. And that's the same tuning as violin, isn't it? Fifths.
Yes, that's right. So double bass has got their own peculiarities because they're tuned in fourths. So there are different variables again, but it's a very complex algorithm of interrelationships between the string length at different nodes, between the bridge and the nut, and then between the bridge and the tailpiece. The string tension is fundamental. And that
so that's very much like guitar too. And if you notice too, if you have a close look at many of the designs for electric guitar particularly, you'll see that the tailpiece sections are actually adjustable.
Yeah, right. Yes.
In terms of the length of where the string actually is terminated, it goes over a roll or a sharp, or
like
a
an
saddle.
edge.
That sets the length. But that piece that sits on is actually tweakable fore and aft.
Yeah.
So that you can actually tweak the intonation of that string on its own.
Its own tension relative to the others.
Yeah. And it's one of the things you do in setup. So it's typical. So you'll play a string open, look at its tuning, and then play a string at the 12th fret. So, on one octave up, and have a look at it and gauge if the intonation is, theoretically, if it's set up correctly, they should both maintain correct relative pitch tuning. But if the intonation's out, you start to see a shift at the harmonic or the one octave up starts to go either sharp or flat, and you need to then adjust the tailpiece length accordingly.
Well, that tuning scheme is flawed inherently, even temperament. To get true resonance, you really have to use the Pythagorean or just intonation schemes. And I know that if I'm playing something solo, I've got to tune up the lower two strings quite sharp relative to even temperament in order for the instrument to resonate properly. Otherwise, it feels dull.
And you're getting to the edge of my understanding of it. Like I'm aware of that, and it's interesting. There are a number of rock guitarists that talk about particular when they're playing in a particular key or particular way, that they'll, instead of tuning for normal correct open tuning, they'll tune for a correct chord or whatever it is because of what it is they're playing. And
that's right.
And that's just an ear thing that they know to do.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about having an instrument with infinitely variable pitch control, with that not having frets, is that you can sort of adjust on a multitude of levels. But look, it's a very interesting discussion. Did someone else just chime in a short time ago? I thought I heard another someone behind. No, perhaps not. But anyhow, look, it's a very interesting subject, and we'll have to hear more about it. We'll have to get some examples. It'll be interesting to hear you just. You've got pretty good audio. Bring up your guitars one time and just give us a riff on a few different instruments, and we can compare them in sharp relief, maybe, or something.
I've actually got a DI.
Okay.
So I can bring them into the mixer quite easily.
Oh, very good.
It's just a matter of. Yeah. And I did have that set up a while ago, but I took it out again because I was playing around with it for something else. But I do have the ability to plug in and DI and
sounds great. That'd
and
be
also
fun.
Go microphone as well. So.
Yeah, if you can do that, it would be good to do, because it's all
great.
It's really interesting. It's a topic, and we can just address it from musical vantage point, technical vantage point. There's a lot of dimension in comparing instruments and looking at the whole way that things work and the way we sort of make creative choices and stuff as well. So that's good. I'm glad your new guitar's going well. It's the most beautiful instrument, and. It sounds like it's been a really good purchase choice.
I'll have to send you some pics of some of the others.
Yeah, it'd be good to see them. And
Look, I have a close friend who's an avid guitarist, and so could I just tell him, he'd be very interested to know the name of it. So could you just tell me what the name of it is?
Yeah, this particular one, well, the name's actually just a group of letters and numbers which represents what it is, but it's essentially a Charvel is the brand, who are now owned by Fender, and they're made in a Mexican factory.
Is that S-H-A-R?
C-H-A-R-V-E-L, Charvel.
Yeah.
They were, if you go back into the 80s, they were known as Charvel Jackson. And the companies are split, so Jackson are kind of separate now, and Charvel have been bought by Fender. And they were the guys that made all of the, when you saw a lot of the, particularly those hair metal bands where you had the guitars with the very sharp angular designs and the sharp tuning machine head sort of areas, the headstocks that angled down at sharp angles. They were one of the companies that used to manufacture a lot of those. And led the way with that radical-looking design. And obviously now everyone's doing it, but but they split at some point, and so Fender have bought them out, and so it's essentially, Frank, it's a Telecaster style guitar, so like a Fender Telecaster, but produced by Charvel with active pickups in it.
Yeah, look, thanks. And are the pickups standard with the guitar, or did you have them fitted?
No, it's one of the reasons I went for it, because I read a lot about these things. So the company that Steve knows, Fishman, who do a lot of pickups for classical instruments as well.
Yeah, Fishman make them for violins and cellos as well.
And a lot of aftermarket, even into acoustic guitar type pickups, they're well known for. But they make all sorts of pickups now, and this set of pickups are called Fishman Fluence, and they have they're manufactured in a different way. They're actually printed. They're not wound coils like a conventional, and so the company is saying, and everyone seems to agree, that it means that they all do sound the same. You don't get the variance that you do with conventional coil wound pickups. And they have 3 distinct voices, so they produce, they're set up in a humbucker configuration, so a humbucking neck pickup and a humbucking bridge, but in that it has 2 voices, an old, what's called vintage PAF, which is the old Gibson patent applied for moniker, which is one of the early Gibson humbucking guitar pickup sounds, and then a modern PAF, which is a fatter, more aggressive sound. And then there's a third position where you pull up the tone control, and that splits them and turns them into single coils.
Wow, it's pretty elaborate.
Yeah, it's got a lot of potential for creative manipulation. It's really quite fascinating. It will be good for you to give us an illustration. I'll play another track, and we can come back and continue this. This is another gypsy group. It's Taraf de Harouk. It's a Romanian gypsy ensemble, but here's an example of the violin using the bow, very slow bow, very close to the bridge, and some of the sort of extra musical effects. And of course there's just so much gypsy intonation in this piece, it's unbelievable, but this will really put your hair on end. Let's have a listen.
Măi, păi de foi Măi, ziua de 22 a venit vremea înapoi, să trăim, frate, și noi, să trăim, frate, și noi. Că foiță foielată, ca să trăim în dreptate, să trăim în libertate, să trăim în libertate. Vai de-o viola, acolo în Timișoara, acolo în Timișoara. Iar studenții ce făcea, logințile le lua și pe străzi, frate, pleca, măi, și din gură că-i striga, los cu dictatoria, măi. Mă, chioriștii ce făceam, chioriștii ce făceam, tunurile le scotea, tunurile le scotea. În popor, frate, trăgea și cu apă că-i stropea, cu apă nu răușea, tancurile scotea. Pe popor că l-omora, măi, în spitale că-i băga, în spitale că-i băga, măi. Mai vede o viola. Mă, ia studenții ce făcea, ia studenții ce făcea. La mașină se suia, la București că pleca, drumul taberii intra, din mașină că striga, sărisaților români, ca să scăpăm de păgâni, măi. La palat că ajungea și din gură că striga, jos cu dictatoria. Ceaușescu cauzea, Ceaușescu cauzea. Iar Bobu ce făcea? Un elicopter că chema și cu el, frate, fugea. La Târgoviște ajungea, măi, la Târgoviște ajungea. Poliția ce făcea? După el că se lua pe Ceaușescu că-l prindea, într-un tax te-l ducea, la București la ducea. Într-o odă el punea și începea, dar judeca. Un doctor, frate, venea, tensiunea că-i lua, măi. Procurorul judeca, e bine, Tirian, așa, ai mâncat România, ai mâncat România, măi.
So the track from Taraf Daharuk and featuring some pretty edgy sounds and
that had an almost blues-esque kind of feel to it.
It's interesting.
Absolutely did.
It's a very interesting one, isn't it? Because that's as Byzantine as it comes. Yet it's come. There's an oblique nod to another tradition by default, maybe. I don't know.
There's a real, like the flattened fifth that they use.
Yeah.
See? That's bluesy.
Yes, it is. It is, very much so. Yep, flattened fifths, flattened thirds, flattened sevenths. It's often aspirational sevenths, sharpened sevenths.
So does that almost make it pentatonic?
Well, it's more Aeolian mode, really. It's modal. And but it's just got so much, gypsy. The gypsy intonation is just
like the slow bow. You could hear the elements of the bow grabbing the
it's
plucking the string as each one went past.
Yeah, I should try that. See what.
Yeah, could you do that?
I'll try. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd depend a lot on the grain of your bow, wouldn't it?
Yeah, look, you have to get yourself really balanced and you'd have to be able to find I think it's a very specialised technique to do well and to do effectively. And you've got to bow right on the bridge and you've got to use a really slow bow and you've just got to get that ratchet grip. And so it's just sort of moving along incrementally and pinching the string and creating that edge. Much easier on the violin because you need less bow grip to excite the violin string.
Get the thing going, yeah.
But I could have tried it on the A. It probably would have worked a bit better. But
top string would be the easier
yes, that'd be the easier one to do. But an interesting effect and very atmospheric, isn't it?
Oh, terrific.
Oh, it just sort of draws you into another world. Oh, I love it.
You want to be part of it, don't you?
You do. It's very interesting there. There's another tension as well because the piano accordion's playing an even temperament right through. And so sort of is the bass, really. And but you get the cembalo, which is just sort of all... I don't know what the tuning on that is. It's very approximate. And then you get this sort of gypsy intonation in the vocal line and in the violin. So it creates an amalgam of tension, which of course is a part of the musical experience. Yeah, great.
They're extraordinarily innately musical, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's like the blues singers, and that's another similarity, I think, is the fact that they just breathe music. I remember this in Romania when that travels. It's
a very cultural music, isn't it? It really is deep-seated in their culture.
It is. It's so true. Yeah, it is. They breathe it. I remember seeing the Shepherds. We were hanging out with these shepherds once, and the guy just pulls a little whistle out, and he's just playing this virtuosic stuff like this, and or even more, and just full flight, amazing. you know, I went to a wedding at one point, just a street wedding, and followed them, and then just heard again this wonderful flair for melody and for expression. It's just completely in their DNA, I think. And another trip we in the Ukraine, we spent some time in the villages as well, and we'd hear them singing and playing, and it's very similar to this, and it's just something that it's a very powerful experience, because you get a sense of it. It's, you know, deeper connections. You know, it's Byzantine music. This music goes back, it's Turkish music, really.
Yeah, very, very heavily Eastern, isn't it?
It is, really influenced. So, anyhow, I've got a particular affection for gypsy music from Moldova and from Romania. It's really, and Hungary, of course, the Shardas. But, good fun. But, yeah, there's some great stuff on the CD. This is such a good CD. Have a listen to this track, number 2. I'll put one more on. Yeah, there's some really incredible music. This is vk3sl, by the way. Test missions on 160 and UHF. Yeah, Romanian music at its best. High velocity. And
Well, indeed.
and that string bass playing is not unlike jazz slap string bass either. You know?
Right.
You can draw connections.
Well, that intro, I was almost thinking, hang on a minute, have you accidentally put in a bit of Apocalyptica or something?
Yes.
It's pretty similar.
Yeah, I know. It's true. Yeah, I think there's a lot of styles draw flavour from, or cross-pollinate at least. And but it's good to hear something that is very generic. It's music from the earth, really. And I believe that would be as authentic as you can get in terms of its those generic qualities. But great group. The Tarif Dahaduk is the name of the band. Yeah, I love gypsy music. Got to play more. I have to listen to Radio Romania. Maybe we can patch Radio Romania through on 160 metres as a permanent.
Well, do they stream?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Mr. Stew listens to Radio Romania.
Tell you what, this is surprising. This will surprise you. They actually have a DRM transmission.
Oh, do they really? Oh, well, there we go. Yes. Although it's all too easy then.
Theoretically, I can pull that out with my SDR.
You probably can.
You would.
Yeah.
You've got the right codec or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Well, it's the digital radio mondial. It's just a matter of whether I can RX the signal or not, depending whether because it gets onto which direction they beam and frequency and stuff. So because of being Europe to beam here, it's not going to be their target audience.
No, that's right. And but you'd have to know time and band conditions and stuff. Yeah, sure.
It's been some of that. Those digital transmissions have stand up pretty well, don't they? It's amazing how good they are, considering.
Well, it is.
Yeah, it's a.
Well, you're able to recover much better audio at much lower signal to noise ratios than normal modes, certainly.
I know, but I like the selective fade of shortwave.
Yeah. And particularly too, and you hear a bit of another station just coming in, and then it just disappears.
Yes, I know.
And piques your interest for a moment. Oh, what's that? Oh,
yes,
it's gone.
It's gone. That's it. Oh, look, they're the experiences I like. They're the things I associate.
Well, that's what shortwave's all about.
Yeah, it is for me. It is. It's that whole sort of experience of trying to find the sweet spot, then it disappears, and it's just this this investigation.
And these people that mess around with exalted carrier and all that, it takes all the fun out of it, really.
Well, yeah, in my mind it does, but I'm probably a bit old-fashioned in my thinking. But I like that. I found a cassette tape the other day I made when I was about 10 years of age of shortwave transmissions. I recorded on my Valve set in my bedroom, and it was. And I was listening back to it, and it brought back all those memories of as a kid and trying to listen in and thinking this is just such a special world.
I just totally was. I've never lost that feeling.
Yeah, they're good. So anyhow, but look, that's the new vogue, and there's a new generation of people with different expectations. So that's all fine.
Maybe it's a little bit weird. My wife thinks it's a bit weird that I enjoy listening to WWV.
Well, that's an experience. Yeah, all the atmospherics, all the propagation, variabilities.
I enjoy it, but it's something that's sort of good for you.
Yeah, it is. It's it's a constant.
Yeah, I still remember VNG here.
Mm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Very sad when that left, really.
Where was VNG?
The time here.
Oh, yes.
It was the Australian version of WWVH, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, it was based down at, where was it? Sort of Gippsland way for a while, wasn't it?
Okay.
Did Dave recorded the end
Yeah, I
of
think he did. It definitely did. Yeah. But anyhow, yeah, nice to remember these things, these traditions. Yay. Well, what's the time, folks? It's getting to the pointy end of the clock. I've got to assist fairly soon. But that was most interesting to hear about, to have a bit of technical musical instrument talk. And you have to set up and get your DI sorted there, Frank, and we'll give us a few examples.
You bet.
Yeah, I think it'd be really good. And I was particularly inspired after yesterday's discussion about Pauline Oliveros, the exponent of one of the early exponents of electronic music back in the 60s. And,
yeah, that was excellent, wasn't it?
Yeah, I really liked her track. What was it? Bye Bye Butterfly. Very interesting sound world, and all done in the analog domain using pretty basic filters and synthesizers. And I did some reading about her last night. I sort of got on the subject, and I'd really like to find out more. There's a TED talk I listened to of hers when she was in her 80s, and it's all about deep listening and inviting people.
You must find that.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. In fact, I'd like to play it at some point. I'll have to find the right moment. It'll have to be on a late night mission, so it's probably not that.
Sure, yeah, I'd love a link, thank you.
Subject of such interest at this time. But I think, it's a very interesting talk, and there's other talks of hers as well. And she sort of had a second zenith when she was in her 80s and did all these amazing public lectures on music, on listening, and on sound worlds, and just inviting people to experience music in a different way without too much baggage, or looking at music just through an open lens, I suppose.
I mean, these early synth people were pioneers, really.
They were, and I realised she was one I didn't feature. And when we did that series on female exponents of electronic music,
Delia Derbyshire and those people.
Yes, that's right. We did a number of programs earlier on great female.
Daphne, what was her name?
Daphne Oram. Oh gosh, did a couple on her. She was very interesting, and her Oramics machine, and where she'd sort of visually represent sine waves and things, and then feed it into a very basic sort of mechanical computer, really, and realise these fascinating ideas. And of course, Granger was a pioneer in that field.
He was.
Yeah. So anyhow, I'll read more about her and listen to more of her music first, and then follow on. But I'll anyone who's interested, or you could just look her up. Her name is Pauline Oliveros. And there's a number of her TED Talk, or a couple of TED Talks and lectures and things. So thoroughly recommend them. And definitely more emissions fodder. So
TED Talks are a very good institution, actually.
So sorry.
TED Talks themselves are a very good institution.
Yeah. There's every subject is.
Yeah, there is, and they're quality people.
Yeah, I've always found them to be very informative.
Oh, right.
And no, they're certainly. We should probably profile some of them. Maybe I'll have a TED Talk evening or. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes, that's right.
Afternoon.
Yes, well, we need more. We need more missions, airspace to have concurrent channels for different tastes, and we could have we could have a TED Talk channel, instructional channel. We could have a Techmoan channel. Well, we've been hearing quite a bit of Techmoan lately, which has been very good.
Oh, yeah.
So look, to wind up, I did find a historic recording here in the collection of Michel Perastro. And Mr. Perastro was a violinist in the first half of the century. He had an incredible career. He played with the New York Phil from, I think Toscanini invited him as the concertmaster of the New York Phil from about 1931 onwards. Before that, I think he was with the San Francisco Symphony. In the 20s, he was a Leopold Auer student, one of the great violinists of his time, but he worked mainly in orchestras. But he made a few solo records in the 20s. And amongst them all is the Zigeunerweisen, Gypsy Airs by Sarasate. So I've got the original 78 of this here, which I'm quite keen to hear. And I can't recall hearing his interpretation of this work, so I'd like to have a listen. We'll put it on, and I'll follow that with a historic recording of Sarasate himself, the composer, playing the work in 1906. He was an old man in 1906.
I was going to say, I thought he'd be too old for a record.
Yeah, no, he was in his 80s, I think, or late 70s, early 80s, and he recorded it in 1906. Now, this guy was around in the 1850s and 60s. It's staggering, really, the fact that there are recordings of Sarasate, and it's really funny. It's quite comedic because he sort of plays the work, and then in the middle section, he has a chat to the piano player in the middle of the recording, and they sort of abort, and he jumps on to the last movement. So it's sort of it's very, very ad hoc. So we'll have a listen to the version with Michel Perastro first, and then I'll default to the recording of Sarasate himself in 1906. So there we go. That'll finish off our Gypsy program for this evening. So we'll see what happens.
Well, vk3sl is signing with the group.
Yeah, vk3sl testing on 160.
Yeah, cheers from VK3OP.
Yeah.
Go to the kitchen as well.
Okay, thank you, Franks. It's been great to catch up, and we'll follow on now with the music of Michel Perastro, vk3sl. You've just heard a recording of Michel Parastro from about 1928 on an old Brunswick 78. Bit of a rarity, that record, and he was playing Zigeunerweisen by Pablo Sarasate. Gypsy Airs is the translation. Well, we'll hear Mr. Sarasate himself now. This is a historic recording made on a G&T, a gramophone typewriter disc, in about 1904, 1906, I can't remember, around about that time. Sarasate was very much at the end of his life. He'd been concertizing a lot in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, 90s. He had a huge career. He wrote an enormous amount of music for the fiddle. And these recordings are incredibly significant because, here he is, one of the great violin virtuosos of the 19th century in person. So we'll hear his own take on the same piece, and it's his own composition. This is vk3sl testing. heard Zagornweisen, Gypsy Airs, written and performed by Pablo Sarasate, a great Spanish fiddle player. A work he wrote in 1878, and in that instance he performed that in 1904. So almost 120 years ago. Well, folks, that winds up our Spanish program for today. And what we'll do is move forward, as we do, with another episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide. Now, I think I've queued up the right track. I'm keeping fingers crossed. If I have accidentally queued up last night's, I offer my apologies, because I've got to run inside in a moment. And just a warm hello to Mr. Pirate, who's given me a quick thumbs up message on the stream. I'm sorry to say it, I'm going to have to cancel the stream at this point. You can go to the secondary stream if you feel inclined. That can be found on my blogspot page, vk3sl.blogspot.com. There are links to the secondary stream, which runs concurrent with YouTube. But YouTube do not like the Hitchhiker's Guide. They're quite happy to give me the proverbial thumbs down if I try and stream it, which is sort of understandable. All right. Thank you, folks, for your indulgence. Look forward to catching up tomorrow. This is VK3SL saying cheers now to